Mr. Horror, where nightmares come to life. Tonight we dive into a chilling tale that will haunt your thoughts. Turn off the lights, brace yourself, and let the horror begin. The Doll's Curse. Ever since I was a kid, I'd always found dolls kind of creepy. They looked innocent. Yet something about their lifeless eyes always sent shivers down my spine. But nothing, I mean nothing, could have prepared me for the cursed relic I'd come to call Lucy. It all started on a stormy night when my eccentric great-aunt passed away, leaving behind a dilapidated mansion full of forgotten treasures and dark secrets. Among these relics was an antique porcelain doll wrapped in faded lace and tucked away in a dusty attic chest. I wasn't expecting much. I thought, hey, it's just a doll, right? But the moment I unwrapped Lucy, a wave of icy dread hit me like a ton of bricks. Her cracked face and those unnervingly shiny eyes seemed to promise that my life was about to get a whole lot darker. I didn't sleep a wink that night. In the dead silence, every creak and whisper in the mansion's corridor sounded like a warning. Friends later joked, "Dude, you're overthinking a stupid doll." But deep down, I knew there was something seriously off. Lucy wasn't just an heirloom. She was a harbinger of doom, and I was about to be tangled in a curse older than the mansion itself. This is the beginning of a story that'll take you through eerie encounters, unexplainable hauntings, and a descent into a nightmare where every shadow hides a secret. Buckle up, because what follows is real, raw, and unfiltered terror. I'll never forget the day I first set foot in the mansion. It was a bitterly cold autumn afternoon when I arrived at the creaking iron gate, my heart pounding in sync with the howling wind. The mansion loomed before me, a hulking, crumbling edifice draped in ivy and mystery. "Welcome home, you idiot," I muttered to myself, half in jest and half in disbelief. I had inherited this place from my great-aunt, someone I'd barely known but who'd clearly lived on the wild side. As I pushed open the heavy wooden door, the stale air and dim lighting made me feel like I'd stepped into a horror flick. Inside, the mansion was a maze of long-forgotten rooms, each stuffed with relics from a bygone era. Most of the stuff was just old junk, but then there was the attic. Everyone in town whispered about that attic, said it held secrets too dark for daylight. With a mix of curiosity and dread, I trudged up the creaky stairs until I reached the attic door. My hand trembled as I turned the knob and pushed the door open. Dust danced in the beam of my flashlight, revealing rows of boxes, old photographs, and tucked away in a battered chest, Lucy. There she was, wrapped in a tattered shawl, her porcelain skin marred by time and neglect. I felt a sudden chill, like an unseen presence was right there with me. "What's up with you, doll?" I joked, trying to shake off the uneasiness. But when I unwrapped her, my pulse spiked. Lucy's eyes, though frozen in a smile, looked almost alive in the flickering light. I couldn't help but feel that they were staring into my very soul. I hauled the chest downstairs and placed Lucy on a dusty shelf in my room. For the first few nights, nothing much happened, just the usual creaks and groans of an old house settling. But then weird stuff started to creep in. At around 3 a.m., I'd wake up to a soft tapping sound, like tiny footsteps skittering across the floor. Once I swore I heard a faint giggle, almost playful yet laced with menace. "It's just the house, man," I'd tell myself, even as a pit of dread formed in my stomach. One night, after a long day of exploring every nook and cranny of the mansion, I collapsed into bed, exhausted. The room was pitch black, save for the weak glow of the moon through the window. I remember drifting off, only to be jerked awake by a strange sound, a whisper. So quiet I couldn't be sure if it was real or a trick of my imagination. "Get out!" it hissed. I sat up, heart hammering, and glanced at Lucy on the shelf. For a split second, it looked like her head had tilted ever so slightly toward me. I blinked hard, convinced I must be dreaming. But when I looked again, she was still, her expression as cold and vacant as ever. Days turned into restless nights. I started keeping a journal of every bizarre occurrence, the unexplained shifting of Lucy's position, the echo of laughter in empty halls, and that unnerving feeling of being watched. My mates back home thought I was losing it, saying stuff like, "Man, you're tripping over a damn doll." But deep down, I knew something was seriously off. The mansion, the attic, Lucy. It was as if they were all parts of a puzzle I hadn't been meant to solve. Then came the night that changed everything. I had been tossing and turning, my mind clouded by nightmares, when a violent gust of wind slammed the attic door shut. I bolted upright, adrenaline surging through me. I raced to the attic, every creak of the old stairs echoing like a death knell. When I reached the top, I found the chest open and Lucy missing from her usual perch. Panic seized me. She was gone. I searched frantically, calling out her name in a hushed, desperate tone. The only answer was the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant rustling of the wind outside. That night, I knew for damn sure that Lucy was no ordinary doll. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. The curse, the malevolence, the unexplainable force that had now taken hold of my life. I was in deep, and there was no turning back. I had inherited more than an old mansion. I had inherited a terror that was about to unravel the fabric of my reality. They say fear is a shadow. It follows you, creeping silently, waiting for you to trip so it can consume you. That's how it felt after Lucy vanished. Like fear itself had moved into my home, settling in the corners and dark spaces, watching me, waiting. The first few nights after locking Lucy in that old chest were quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that hums in your ears and makes you question if you're really alone. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the wind against the windows felt sharper, louder, heavier. I tried to convince myself it was over, that I'd imagined everything, that Lucy was just a doll, an object, nothing more. But that was a lie. A lie, I whispered to myself, just to make it through the night. Deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't over, not even close. It started with small things, shadows that didn't seem quite right. A cold breeze drifting through the room even though the windows were shut tight, lights flickering when they shouldn't. And then the whispers. The first time I heard them, I was half asleep, a hazy place between dreaming and waking. The sound was faint, almost like a sigh brushing against my ear. "Come play." I snapped awake, heart hammering against my ribs. I sat up in bed, scanning the dark room. Nothing, just shadows and silence. My logical brain told me it was nothing, just the wind, just a dream. But my gut said otherwise. And I've learned to trust my gut. The next night, I heard it again. Only this time, I was awake. Wide awake. I was reading in bed when it happened. The voice was clearer, softer, like a child's voice echoing from far away. "Come, play with me." I froze, book slipping from my hands. The whisper came from the hallway, from the attic. I told myself not to go, told myself I was being stupid. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, isn't it? I grabbed the flashlight, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stay put. But my feet moved anyway. The house felt heavier as I walked, like it was holding its breath. The hallway stretched out before me, longer than it should have been. Shadows swirled along the walls, and the air turned cold, unnaturally cold. I reached the attic door. Locked, just like I left it. I pressed my ear to the wood, listening. Silence. Nothing. I almost laughed. Almost. Then the knock came. 3 sharp taps. Slow, deliberate. I staggered back, my blood turning to ice. The knock came again, 3 more. And then, "Come play." Whispers, just on the other side. I didn't open the door. I wasn't that stupid. Instead, I turned and ran back to my room, slammed the door, locked it, shoved a chair under the handle for good measure, and I waited. Sleep wasn't an option. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the flashlight like it was a weapon. The hours stretched, slow and suffocating, until dawn finally bled through the curtains. That morning, I told myself I was done. I'd call someone. Get rid of the doll. Burn it if I had to. But when I went to the attic, the door was wide open. And Lucy was gone. Panic clawed at me as I tore through the house, room by room, closet by closet. I searched under beds, behind furniture, everywhere. But she wasn't there. I was about to give up when I saw it. In the living room, sitting on the old armchair by the fireplace, was Lucy. Her porcelain skin was flawless. Her eyes, cold, lifeless, seemed to follow me as I stepped closer. And that damn smile. Always that same eerie, knowing smile. I stared, my heart thundering. I didn't touch her, didn't dare. Instead, I grabbed a heavy blanket, threw it over her, and stuffed her back into the chest. This time, I wasn't taking chances. I wrapped the chest in chains, locked it tight, and shoved it into the basement. Out of sight, out of mind. Or so I thought. That night, I dreamed of her. In the dream, I was standing in the attic. The light was dim, shadows curling along the walls. Lucy sat in the middle of the floor, her eyes black voids, her mouth stretched into a grin that felt too wide, too human. She tilted her head, and the whisper came again. "Come play." I woke up drenched in sweat, my chest heaving. The dream felt real, too real. I swung my legs off the bed, intending to shake it off, maybe splash cold water on my face. That's when I saw it. Tiny footprints, dusty, delicate, leading from the door to the foot of my bed. And the whispers, closer now. You can't hide forever. I didn't know what to do. Was I losing my mind? Was it stress, isolation, lack of sleep? I tried to tell myself that. Tried to believe it, but when I walked downstairs the next morning and saw the basement door wide open, the chains from the chest scattered across the floor, I knew the truth. Lucy was out, and she wasn't playing games anymore. From that night on, things got worse. I'd hear her giggling, soft, sweet, but wrong, like a child imitating laughter but missing the warmth behind it. Shadows would move when they shouldn't. Lights would flicker even when the power was steady. And the whispers, always the whispers. "Come play." They came from everywhere, from the walls, the ceiling, sometimes from inside my own head. I started locking every door, leaving lights on. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. My body was running on fear alone. But no matter how many locks I turned, no matter how bright the lights burned, it didn't matter. Because every morning I'd find her, sitting somewhere new, watching me, always smiling. The last straw came when I found her in my bed. I woke up to the sensation of something cold brushing against my arm. My eyes snapped open, and there she was, lying next to me, her porcelain face inches from mine. That smile, wide and cruel. I screamed, jumped from the bed, but when I turned back, the bed was empty. Just the sheets, just silence. But on the pillow in the dust were tiny handprints. That's when I knew. Lucy wasn't just a doll. She was something else. and she wasn't done playing. I didn't sleep after that night. How could I? The image of Lucy lying beside me, her cold porcelain face inches from mine, haunted me. Her eyes, lifeless but knowing, burned into my mind. That smile, mocking, sinister, stayed with me even when I closed my eyes. But it wasn't just fear keeping me awake. It was something else, something darker. I wasn't alone in that house. The next morning, I walked through my home like a ghost. Every room felt unfamiliar, hostile. Shadows stretched long and heavy, curling in corners and creeping along the walls. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on me, suffocating me. I needed to get rid of her, for good this time. I grabbed the chest from the basement, chains still dangling from it like broken limbs. I threw Lucy inside, her glassy eyes staring up at me as if she knew exactly what I was doing. I slammed the lid shut and nailed it closed. I was done playing her game. But she wasn't done playing mine. That night, I decided to burn her. I dragged the chest out to the backyard, my heart hammering with every step. The darkness pressed close, the air thick with the promise of something watching. I built the fire, my hands shaking, sweat dripping down my spine. I hesitated for just a second, long enough to wonder if I was going crazy, if I was really about to burn a doll because I thought it was haunting me. But then I heard it, a giggle, soft, sweet, coming from the chest. That was enough. I shoved the chest into the flames, stepping back as the fire roared to life, orange sparks flying into the night sky. The wood cracked and hissed, smoke curling into the air. I waited, watching, and then I heard it, screaming. Not the crackle of burning wood, not the hiss of flames, but a scream, sharp and piercing. A scream that sounded human. A scream that echoed through the trees and clawed its way into my bones. I stood there frozen, my blood running cold. I wanted to believe it was my mind playing tricks, that it wasn't real. But the scream didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, and then it was behind me. I spun around, heart in my throat, but there was nothing there. Just shadows, just the night. But when I turned back to the fire, the chest was gone. Ashes scattered in the wind. Chains melted into the earth. No sign of the doll. No sign of Lucy. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch staring at the ashes, waiting for something, anything to happen. But nothing did. Morning came, and with it a fragile sense of relief. Maybe it was over. Maybe the fire had worked. Maybe I was free. I held on to that hope like a lifeline until I went back inside. There she was, sitting on the living room chair, pristine, untouched. Her porcelain face flawless, her eyes bright, and that smile wider, sharper, like she was happy to be home. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared, my mind racing. How? How could she be back? I watched her burn, watched her vanish into ash. I whispered, "What do you want from me?" And in the silence, the answer came. Not from her lips, but from the shadows. Play. The next few days were a blur of fear and madness. Every time I tried to leave, something would stop me. The car wouldn't start. My phone would die. The doors would lock, trapping me inside. Lucy was always there, always watching. Sometimes I'd find her sitting in the kitchen, other times in my bedroom. Once I found her in the shower, her tiny hands pressed against the glass, leaving ghostly prints. And the whispers, they never stopped. "Come play." They echoed from the walls, the ceiling, even inside my head. I tried to fight it, tried to ignore it, but fear eats at you, gnaws at the edges of your sanity until there's nothing left but raw, shaking nerves. I started talking to her, begging her, pleading for it to stop. But Lucy didn't want to stop. She wanted to play. The dreams got worse. I'd dream of running, always running. But the shadows would catch me, pull me back, and she'd be there waiting, her smile growing wider, her eyes black as midnight. In one dream, she whispered, "If you don't play, I'll find someone who will." I woke up screaming. That's when I realized it wasn't just me she wanted. It was anyone, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I started researching, obsessively. Every legend, every horror story about haunted dolls, cursed objects, ancient rituals, anything that could help me stop her. I learned that some things, some spirits, are bound to objects, but others are bound by blood, by fear. Lucy didn't just want to haunt me. She wanted to own me. I knew what I had to do. I had to end the game. But I didn't know if that meant destroying her, or destroying myself. And as I sat in the dark, the whispers came again. Closer. It's your turn. And I knew the game was far from over. I couldn't take it anymore. The whispers, the shadows, the constant feeling that I was being watched. It was breaking me. Lucy wasn't just haunting my home. She was haunting my mind. I tried to leave again, packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and bolted for the door. But when I twisted the handle, it wouldn't budge. The lock was frozen, unmoving. I tried the windows, nailed shut. Every exit was sealed. And then I heard it. A soft giggle from the stairs. I turned, heart hammering in my chest. There she was, sitting at the top of the staircase, legs crossed, her head tilted to one side like she was curious. That same cold porcelain face, that same haunting smile. "You can't leave," a voice whispered. Not hers, not mine. Just a voice. From nowhere. From everywhere. I dropped my bag and backed away, breath coming in ragged gasps. "What do you want?" I choked out. The doll didn't move, didn't blink. She just sat there, silent and waiting. But I already knew the answer. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat. I just sat on the floor, staring at the doll, waiting for something, anything to happen. But she didn't move. She just watched. When dawn finally came, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe the night had been a nightmare, a trick of my mind. But when I stood up and turned, I stopped cold. The walls. Words were scratched into them. Deep, angry gouges carved into the plaster. Over and over again, the same two words. "Play with me." I staggered back, my stomach twisting. I grabbed a cloth and started scrubbing, but the words wouldn't fade. No matter how hard I scrubbed, they stayed etched deep, like scars. And that's when I noticed it. The shadow. It wasn't mine. It wasn't shaped like me. It was shaped like her. I couldn't stay here. Not anymore. I needed help. I tried calling someone, anyone. But every time I picked up my phone, it died in my hand. I tried the landline. Static. No dial tone. I was trapped. And she was waiting. I started hearing it at night. The scratching. Soft at first, like nails on wood, and then louder, sharper, until it was deafening, echoing through the walls coming from inside them. I pressed my ear to the plaster, holding my breath, and I heard it. Whispers. "Let me out. Let me out. Let me out." By the third day, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I wasn't thinking. I was just surviving. Every shadow was a threat. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a scream. I'd find Lucy in different places, on the couch, by the window at the foot of my bed, always watching. always waiting. And the whispers never stopped. Play with me. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a command. On the fourth night, I woke to find her in my room. Not sitting, not lying, standing, right by my bed. Her head tilted, that eerie smile stretched too wide. And in her hand, a small, rusted knife. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stared, paralyzed, my heart thundering in my chest. She didn't move either. But her shadow did. It stretched across the floor, creeping toward me like a living thing, clawing, reaching. I shut my eyes, whispered a prayer I barely remembered, and when I opened them, she was gone. But the knife wasn't. It lay on my pillow, cold and sharp, the blade stained dark. Not with blood, but with ash. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I was done hiding, done running. If Lucy wanted to play, I'd play. But I'd play by my rules. I spent the next day preparing. Salt, candles, a circle drawn in chalk, thick and white. I didn't know if it would work, but it was all I had. Every horror story I'd read, every old legend, they all pointed to the same thing: contain the evil, trap it, burn it. That night I waited. Sitting inside the circle, my hands shaking but steady. The knife lay in front of me, my last defense. And then she came. The lights flickered, shadows twisting on the walls. The air grew cold, breath turning to mist. And then she stepped out of the darkness. Lucy. Not just the doll, something more, something darker. Her shadow loomed tall and jagged, stretching toward me like claws. She didn't speak, didn't whisper. She just stared. And then she stepped forward. One step, then another. I held my ground, held my breath. She reached the circle and stopped. The air grew heavier, thicker, pressing against me like a weight. She couldn't cross it. The salt held her back. For now. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. My voice cracked, dry and broken. No answer. Just that same dead stare. "What do you want?" Silence. And then a whisper. Not from her. From the shadows. To be free. That's when I realized it. Lucy wasn't the one trapped here. I was. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, days. Time didn't matter. I was locked in a game I didn't understand, with rules I couldn't control. But I knew one thing. I wasn't giving up. If Lucy wanted to play, I'd play. But I'd win. I thought the salt circle would keep me safe. That as long as I stayed within its fragile, white borders, Lucy couldn't touch me. But I was wrong. The first sign came at midnight. The candle flames flickered, not from a draft, but as if something unseen was breathing on them. The shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting into unnatural shapes. Faces, eyes, claws. Then the scratching started again. This time it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from inside the circle. I looked down. The salt was moving, shifting, like invisible fingers were tracing lines through it, trying to break it apart. "No," I whispered, voice shaking. "You can't come in. You can't." But the shadows didn't listen. They pressed against the circle, testing it, pushing it. I could hear whispers, soft and hissing, words I couldn't understand, foreign, ancient. "Let me in. Let me in." The candlelight dimmed, swallowed by the growing darkness. My pulse pounded in my ears. I grabbed the knife, clutching it so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't know if it would help. I didn't care. I wasn't going down without a fight. The shadows grew bolder, creeping closer, pressing against the salt like waves against the shore. And then, without warning, the line broke. Just a small gap, barely an inch wide. But it was enough. The darkness slipped through, a tendril of black mist, slithering toward me. Cold, sharp, hungry. I backed away, pressing myself against the wall, but there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "Stop!" I screamed, but my voice sounded small and weak. The mist coiled at my feet, rising slowly, taking shape, forming fingers, a face, Lucy's face, smiling, watching. And then she spoke. "You broke the rules." The knife in my hand felt useless, heavy and dull, but I swung it anyway, slashing at the mist. It passed through harmlessly, like cutting through smoke. Her laughter echoed in the darkness, soft and sweet and deadly. "You can't hurt me," she whispered. "But I can hurt you." And then I felt it. A sharp, cold sting on my ankle, like a needle piercing deep. I looked down and saw it. Darkness curling up my leg like smoke, seeping into my skin, burning, freezing. I screamed, fell. The world tilted. When I woke, the circle was gone, the salt scattered, the candles dead. And Lucy? She was sitting on my chest, small hands pressed against my ribs, her cold porcelain face inches from mine. "Now we can really play," she whispered. And in her hand, she held the knife. This wasn't a haunting. It was a game. And it had only just begun. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Lucy sat on my chest, her cold porcelain face hovering inches from mine, her hollow eyes gleaming in the darkness. The blade in her tiny hand caught the faintest glimmer of moonlight, casting a sharp, silver glow across the room. "Now we can really play," she whispered, her voice soft and innocent but dripping with malice. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen, pinned beneath her weight, paralyzed by fear. Then she pressed the knife to my throat. Not hard, just enough to remind me it was real, and that she was in control. Suddenly, the shadows around the room deepened, writhing like living things. Whispers filled the air, echoing from every corner, voices overlapping, angry, mournful, desperate. "You broke the rules. You belong to me now. You can't escape." The walls seemed to close in. The ceiling pressed lower. The air grew heavy, thick with dread. And then Lucy spoke again. "Play or die." I didn't have a choice. With a trembling voice, I whispered, What do you want me to do?" Her smile widened. "Hide and seek." The moment the words left her lips, the pressure on my chest lifted. I gasped for air, rolling onto the floor, coughing and shaking. But when I looked up, she was gone. Or so I thought. The shadows still lingered, watching, waiting. And then I heard her. "Run." I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging through me. The house was no longer my home. It was a maze of darkness and terror. Every corner felt wrong, every shadow alive. I ran. Through the hallway, past the broken mirror that reflected not me but her, through the living room where the couch was overturned, scratch marks gouged into the walls. "I'm coming," she sang from somewhere behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I ran up the stairs, heart pounding so hard, it echoed in my ears. I slammed my bedroom door shut, locking it, barricading it with a chair. I pressed my back against it, listening. Silence. But silence was worse. Then I heard it. A giggle. Not from the hallway. From inside the room. I turned slowly, dread curling in my gut. And there she was, standing by the window, knife in hand, eyes black as the night. "Found you." I don't remember screaming. I don't remember running. I only remember the cold, Sharp sting as the knife slashed through the air, grazing my arm. I crashed through the door, stumbling back down the stairs. Blood dripped from my skin, warm and sticky. The house tilted, the walls groaning as if they were alive, as if they were feeding off my fear. And the whispers followed. You can't run. You can't hide. You belong to me. I burst into the basement, slamming the door shut behind me. Darkness swallowed me whole, but it was safer than facing her. Or so I thought. The basement was colder, the shadows deeper. I groped along the walls, fingers brushing against damp stone. My heart pounded, every beat a scream in my chest. And then I saw it. The old trunk. The one I had found her in. Desperation took over. I threw it open, digging through the layers of dust and cobwebs. Beneath the torn fabric and rotting wood, I found it. An old journal, its leather cover cracked and brittle. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. The writing was old, but the message was clear. To bind her, burn the vessel. To free her, speak her name. I didn't know what it meant. Not fully, but I didn't have time to think. Footsteps echoed above, light, soft, playful. She was coming. I grabbed the doll from where it had fallen, its porcelain face cracked, smiling still. I poured kerosene from an old can onto it, my hands slick and trembling. I struck a match, the flame bright and sharp. But as I held it over the doll, a voice stopped me. If you burn me, you burn too. Her whisper filled the room, cold and cruel. You belong to me. I hesitated, the flame flickering. Fear gnawed at me. But then I saw the shadow creeping down the stairs. And I knew. I'd rather burn than belong to her. I dropped the match. The fire roared to life, orange and hungry. The doll screamed, the sound sharp and inhuman. The shadows writhed, twisting and shrieking. The house groaned, walls trembling as the flames spread. I ran, through smoke and shadow, through fear and flame. I burst out the front door as the house collapsed behind me, swallowed by fire. And then, silence. It's been months. The house is gone. Nothing left but ashes and memories. But I still hear her. Sometimes at night, in the darkness. Play with me, she whispers. I tell myself it's just my mind, just the trauma. But I know better. Because every morning I find the same thing on my doorstep. A small porcelain doll, cracked, smiling, waiting. And that's the end of today's terrifying tale. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Mr. Horror for more spine-chilling nightmares. Your support keeps the darkness alive. See you in the next horror story, if you dare.